What I thought I could do today is really share with you the broad framework with which I look at this issue. Because whenever people ask me, what I do for a living, I tell them I'm actually a translator from English to English. I like to take complex issues, and I like to break them down in ways I can understand and then share that with others. But my method of looking at the world is that I'm a big believer one must never think in the box. One must never think out of the box. Today, I think to understand what's going on in the world, you have to think without a box. You have to integrate a whole bunch of different perspectives. And the three perspectives that I'm using to think about the world most broadly is I actually think we're in the middle of not one, not two, but three climate changes all at the same time. And I want to, as quickly as I can, give you my framework, which I hope will help frame the day and our discussions going forward. I think we're actually in the middle of three nonlinear accelerations all at the same time with the three largest forces on the planet, which I call the market, Mother Nature, and Moore's Law. So Mother Nature is climate change, but it's not just climate change, it's biodiversity loss and population growth, particularly in the developing world. If you put Mother Nature on a graph in those terms, it looks like a hockey stick. It looks like Glacier National Park 1913, Glacier National Park 2012. Or it looks like Lake Chad 1963, Lake Chad 2001, Lake Chad 2017 is a fraction of that. Or it looks like global average temperature, a hockey stick. Or it looks like really the instances of extreme weather since 1988, another hockey stick. Or it looks like really the mother of all hockey sticks, global population growth. That's the first acceleration we're in the middle of. We're in the middle of another acceleration. We're in the middle of acceleration, what I call the market. But for me, the market is globalization, but not your grandfather's globalization. That was actually containers on ships and planes. That's been flat actually to going down. What is bringing the world today more tightly together is digital globalization, where everything is being digitized and globalized through Facebook, PayPal, MOOCs, et cetera. Put that on a graph, digital globalization, and it looks like that, another hockey stick, total data consumed per month. Or it looks like that, mobile subscriptions in the United States, and the same applies anywhere in the world, another hockey stick. We're also, though, in the middle of a third acceleration, and that's the acceleration in technology. And that is what I call Moore's Law, for short. Coined by Gordon Moore in 1965, the co-founder of Intel. Gordon Moore posited in a famous article in Electronics magazine that the speed and power of microchips would double roughly every 24 months, and the price would roughly stay the same. And Moore's Law has held up for 52 years. And it is the driver of all technological change. Now, for 52 years, actually, people have been writing, about once a year. Moore's Law is over. Moore's Law is over. Going to run out. And what all those authors have in common is they were all wrong. Moore's Law is actually alive and well. This PowerPoint is running on, I would guess, an Intel 14 nanometer chip. It has 37.5 million transistors per square millimeter. Under Moore's Law, Intel has just begun shipping its 10 nanometer chip. It has 100 million transistors per square millimeter. Now, why is that important? Why is that important to you attending this conference? Because the difference between a 14 nanometer chip and a 100 nanometer chip is going to be the difference between a self-driving car that needs the whole trunk of the car in order to contain the brains, and a self-driving car that's going to need just a little box under the front seat. So we're at a very interesting inflection point. The folks at Intel, it's so hard for the human mind to grasp the power of an exponential, one of these hockey sticks. So a couple of years ago, the Intel engineers, they took a 1971 Volkswagen Beetle. And they said, what if this Volkswagen Beetle had improved at the same rate microchips had since 1971? And what they determined was that if it had, today that VW Beetle would go 300,000 miles an hour, it would get 2 million miles per gallon, and it would cost 4 cents. You'd be able to drive it your entire life on 1 tank of gas. So all of these accelerations are interacting with one another. More Moore's Law drives more globalization. More globalization drives more climate change and more solutions to climate change at the same time. There's enough experts here on climate. I'm not going to go into the Mother Nature acceleration any further. The market, I think we all know, the digital acceleration. I'm just going to take a minute to dig a little deeper on the Moore's Law acceleration, because it's really driving both the climate growth forces and the climate solution processes. So my chapter on Moore's Law, this is all from my latest book, thank you for being late. My chapter on that subject is called, What the Hell Happened in 2007? What the hell happened in 2007? Now I know what you're thinking, 2007, such an innocuous year, what's this guy talking about? Well, here's what happened in 2007. The year was kicked off next door, just next door, when a guy named Steve Jobs introduced the first one of these babies, the first iPhone in January 2007, beginning a process which we're about halfway through of putting in the hands of everyone on the planet this is actually a handheld computer with more compute power than the Apollo space mission, and it doubles as a phone and a camera, I'm told. Okay, that's how the year kicked off. In 2007, a company called Facebook opened their platform to anyone with a registered email address. And suddenly, it broke out of high schools and universities, was made available to old fuddy-duddies like you and me, and in 2007, Facebook went global. In 2007, a company called Twitter split off on its own independent platform and went global. In 2007, the most important software you may have never heard of, called Hadoop, named after the founder's son's toy elephant, was launched into the wild. Hadoop is what enables 1 million computers to work together as if they're one. I think that's called big data. Hadoop didn't invent those algorithms. They're actually invented by Google, GFS, and MapReduce. But as Doug Cunny, the founder of Hadoop, explains in the book, Google lives in the future and sends us letters back home. And what Google did was leave a trail of breadcrumbs for the open source community, its big data algorithms. And 2007, the open source community took it global. In 2007, the second most important software you may have never heard of, called VMware, went public. VMware is what enables any operating system to work on any computer. That's the foundation of cloud computing. In 2007, the third most important software you've never heard of, just down the street here, called GitHub. Today, the world's largest repository of open source software, with 15 million users, opened its doors. In 2007, the same company called Google bought a little-known TV company called YouTube. And in 2007, the same company called Google launched into the wild its own operating system called Android. In 2007, IBM launched the world's first cognitive computer called Watson. In 2007, the first essay was ever written and launched into the world anonymously about a new currency, cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. In 2007, Netflix streamed its first video. In 2007, a guy up in Seattle named Jeff Bezos launched the world's first ebook reader. It was called the Kindle. In 2007, again, just down the street, 3 design students were attending the design conference in San Francisco, and they noticed all the hotel rooms were sold out. But one of them had 3 spare air mattresses. And he thought it might be cool that if they rented out these air mattresses to people who couldn't get hotel rooms, and it worked out so well in 2007, they started a company called Airbnb. Yeah, that's why it's called Airbnb, because of the founding air mattresses. Here's what else happened in 2007. This is a graph of the cost of sequencing a human genome. You'll notice it's $100 million in 2001. It falls to $10 million in 2006, and then it goes over a cliff like an EKG heading for a heart attack in 2007, down to $100,000. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, solar energy took off in 2007, as did a process for extracting natural gas from tight shale called fracking. Between 2006 and 2008, America's total natural gas reserves increased by 35%, a staggering number for an 18-month period. In 2007, this is a graph of social networks, basically. That white line going down, that's the cost of generating a megabit of data. And you'll notice it goes straight down like another EKG heading for a heart attack in 2007. The blue line going up is the speed of transmitting that data, and you notice the 2 lines cross in 2008, close enough for government work. And of course, in 2007, this thing we call the cloud was born. First year statistics show up is 2008, which means the cloud was born in 2007. In 2007, basically late 2006, the internet crossed 1 billion users, seems to have been a tipping point. In 2007, Intel, for the first time, went off silicon to extend Moore's law with non-silicon materials. And in 2005, Michael Dell, the founder of Dell Computers, retired. And in 2007, he decided he better come back to work. Turns out, friends, 2007 may be understood in time as the single greatest technological inflection point, or surely one of them, since Gutenberg invented the printing press, and we all completely missed it. Why? Because of 2008. Yeah, right when our physical technologies just took off like we're on a moving sidewalk in an airport that suddenly went from 5 to 50 miles an hour, right when that happened, all of our social technologies, the learning reform, the managing reform, the regulatory reform, everything froze because we entered the deepest recession since 1929. And in that dislocation, many Brexit and Trump voters were born. What happened in 2008? Very important for this conference. What happened, basically, I believe, is this computer is actually made of 5 key parts. It's got a Moore's law processor, it's got a networking, it's got a storage chip, it's got a sensor, and it's got software. I believe all 5 were in a Moore's law, and I believe they all melded together in 2007 into this thing we call the cloud. The cloud. But I never use the term the cloud in my book because it sounds so fluffy, so soft, so cuddly. Sounds like a Joni Mitchell song. I've looked at clouds from both sides. This ain't no cloud, folks. This is actually a supernova. Supernova, for the science students among you will know, is the largest force in nature. It's the explosion of a star. And what happened in 2007 was a release of energy into the hands of men, women, and machines that changed 4 kinds of power, changed the power of one. What one person can do today as a maker or breaker is unlike anything we have ever seen before. We have a president now who can sit in his pajamas in the East Wing of the White House and tweet directly to 1 billion people around the planet without an editor, libel lawyer, or filter. I'm not going there. But here's what's really scary. The head of ISIS can do the exact same thing from his bunker in Raqqa province in Syria. The power of one has changed. The power of machines have changed. Machines are now acquiring all 5 senses. We've never lived in a world where machines had all 5 senses. The power of flows have changed. Ideas now flow, circulate, congeal, and break faster than we've ever seen before. Look at our views on sexual harassment, how that has flowed around the world. And lastly, it's changed the power of many. Men and women, amplified now by these machines and made more interdependent, we have become so powerful now that we have become the largest forcing function on and in nature, which is why the new climate era is being named for us, the Anthropocene. These 4 kinds of power, friends, they're not just changing your world. They're fundamentally reshaping your world. So let me talk about, just to close, how this reshaping, I argue in the book, it's reshaping 5 realms: politics, geopolitics, the workplace, ethics, and community. But let me talk about how it's changing politics, because that connects up with Jerry's talk last night, Governor Brown's talk last night, and a lot of what you're going to hear today. How do we reshape our politics now to deal with these accelerations? Because as I said, we're in the middle of not 1, but 3 climate changes at once. We're in a change of the climate. We're going from what I call later to now. I grew up in Minnesota. I was born in 1953. When I grew up, later was when I could fix that river, clean that lake, save that forest, rescue that orangutan. I could do it now or I could do it later. Well, today, later is officially over. Later will now be too late because of these accelerations. So whatever you're going to save in the environment or climate, you better save it now. Later will be too late. That's a climate change. We're in the middle of the change of the climate of globalization. We're going from a world that was interconnected to a world that's interdependent. And in an interdependent world, you get a geopolitical inversion where your friends can kill you faster than your enemies. If Greek and Italian banks go under tomorrow, this room's half full. Greece, Italy, wait a minute, they're in the EU, they're in NATO, they're out. Greece and Italy can kill us in an interdependent world. And in an interdependent world, your rivals falling becomes more dangerous than your rivals rising. If China takes 6 more islands in the South China Sea, personally, I couldn't care less. If China loses 6% growth, this room is empty. China falling is much more dangerous to us than China rising in an interdependent world. And lastly, we're in a change in the climate of technology. Because of all those things that happened around Moore's Law, every company today can, and therefore must, analyze, optimize, prophesize, customize, and digitize/automatize any possible job, product, or service. Any company can now analyze, they can now, using big data, find the needle in the haystack of their data as the norm, not the exception. They can reveal patterns they never saw before. They can optimize. I flew out here on Virgin Air. You can bet General Electric was telling Virgin every mile how to fly, what altitude to fly, and what speed to get the maximum energy out of those GE engines to optimize them, because those engines were connected by sensors in real time to GE headquarters. I can prophesize. You've seen the IBM Watson ad. Repairman shows up at the high-rise building to fix the elevator. Doorman says the elevator's not broken. Repairman says, I know, but it will be in 6 weeks and 3 days. I can now use data and analytics to do predictive maintenance and servicing like never before, and I can digitize and automatize any job, product, or service now. Those 5 together, they're a climate change that is affecting every business. So what does that mean for politics? And what does that mean for how you all think about this world? What it means is we have an incredible adaptation challenge. We're going through 3 climate changes at once. We have an adaptation challenge in globalization, in climate, and in technology, and in the workplace. So as I thought about that, I said to myself, what do you want when the climate changes? What kind of adaptation? You want 2 things. You want resilience. You need to be able to take a blow, because when all these climates are changing at once, you can get a lot of disruption. But you also want propulsion. You want to be curled up in a ball into your bed because the climate's changing. So then I sat back and I said, who do I interview of how you get resilience and propulsion when the climate changes? And then how do you apply it to technology, globalization, and climate? And then I realized I knew this woman. She was 3.8 billion years old. Her name was Mother Nature, and she dealt with more climate changes than anybody. So I called her up, I made an appointment, I went out to see her. I sat down and I said, Mother Nature, how do you produce resilience and propulsion when the climate changes? Well, she said to me, Tom, I got to tell you, everything I do unconsciously, but these are my strategies. The first thing she said is, I am incredibly adaptive. Oh, by the way, Tom, I do it in a very brutal way. It's something I call natural selection, but I am incredibly adaptive. In my world, it's not the smartest, it's not the strongest, it's the most adaptive that survive and thrive. Secondly, she said, I'm incredibly entrepreneurial. Wherever I see a blank space in nature, I fill it with a plant or animal perfectly adapted to that niche. I'm incredibly entrepreneurial. Third, she said, I'm incredibly pluralistic. Oh my God, I'm the most diverse person you've ever met. I love pluralism. Try 20 different species, see who wins. You know, I am so pluralistic. And she told me she noticed something, that her most diverse ecosystems are her most resilient ecosystems and her most propulsive ecosystems. Fourth, she said, I'm incredibly sustainable. In my world, everything is food, and it's a closed circle. Eat food, poop seed, eat food, poop seed. She said, I'm incredibly sustainable. Fifth, she said, I'm really hybrid and heterodox in my thinking. Nothing dogmatic in my world. I'm incredibly hybrid and heterodox. I'll try all kinds of trees with all kinds of soils, all kinds of bees with all kinds of flowers. And lastly, she said, Tom, I do believe in the laws of bankruptcy. I kill all my failures. I return them to the great manufacturer in the sky, and I take their energy to nourish my successes. So my argument is that the companies, the communities, the countries, and the political parties that most closely mirror Mother Nature's killer apps are the ones that are going to thrive in this age of 3 climate changes at once. And the reason all our political parties are blowing up today is they were designed to answer a different set of questions. They were designed to answer questions of the New Deal, the Industrial Revolution, the early IT revolution, and civil rights, wrote both race and gender. And I believe the central question you have to answer today as a political party is how you produce resilience and propulsion for more of your people in the face of these three accelerations, these three climate changes at once. And just to segue, therefore, to introducing my friend Astro Teller, who runs Google X, I was out when I was working on the book and interviewed Astro, and was sharing this thesis with him. And he went over to his whiteboard, and he took out 3 magic markers to try to do a visual depiction of what I was trying to say. And he drew this graph. So the blue line here, Astro labeled human adaptability. The blue line reflects the average rate at which human beings and societies adapt to change over time. And you'll notice it has a positive slope, but it's very gradual. The white line is technology. So you'll notice it's very flat over here. That's because in the 11th century and 12th century, innovation happened very slowly. There was no new bow and arrow. There was no bow and arrow 2.0 between the 11th and 12th century, okay? It was a very flat, but then we got the scientific revolution, Copernicus and Galileo, and then Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and the line starts to go straight north. Then Astro took out his magic marker and he drew that little diamond there. And I said, what's that, Astro? He said, that's where we are. We're at a point now where technology is evolving faster than the average human being and society can adapt to. Then he went over and he got a 3rd magic marker, and he drew that little dotted line there. And I said, what's that, Astro? He said, that's learning faster and governing smarter. How do we lift the adaptation line? By learning faster and governing smarter so we can rise to the challenge and the opportunity of 3 climate changes at once. Thank you very much. And Astro, come on out.